Deep inside your brain is a survival mechanism that has functioned perfectly for millions of years. It is the core of our instinct. But in the modern world, this ancient hardware contains a specific opening, one that institutions can learn to influence. Biologists call this the smoke detector principle. Evolution wired our threat detection to be hyper-reactive because for our ancestors, the metabolic cost of a false alarm was tiny, but the cost of missing a real predator was absolute. We are biologically biased towards seeing threats even when they aren't there. When you perceive an existential danger, you experience an amygdala hijack. This is an acute neurobiological event where the brain's emotional center physically overrides the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logic, deduction, and evaluating long-term consequences. In this state, your attention narrows. Your capacity for skepticism or nuanced analysis is sidelined by a primitive neural system that demands an immediate, impulsive response. This evolutionary hypervigilance leaves us with an inherent cognitive sensitivity. It makes human populations remarkably susceptible to any entity that can manage and broadcast the flow of threat information. Political theorists have recognized this sensitivity for centuries. From the writings of Thomas Hobbes to Niccolo Machiavelli, the argument has been that a baseline of public anxiety isn't a byproduct of governance. It is a tool for maintaining social order. Noam Chomsky's propaganda model describes how this works in practice through the fifth filter. By manufacturing a terrifying common enemy, elite interests can split opposition and channel public energy toward accepting authority. This process often relies on moral panics, episodes where a specific group or condition is defined as a threat to societal values. These panics bypass rational debate, leading the public to view increased control as their only means of safety. We saw this structurally after 9/11 with the Homeland Security Advisory System. This color-coded language of threat kept the public in a perpetually defensive mode, using national security signaling to encourage a culture of fear consumption. By continuously broadcasting abstract existential dangers, the state can keep the biological smoke detector in a state of constant activation. This leads citizens to surrender their autonomy in exchange for the promise of security. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a global laboratory for these strategies. In many nations, public health communication fundamentally shifted from providing transparent data to using covert behavioral strategies to drive compliance. In the United Kingdom, documentation from the advisory group SPIB reveals a deliberate choice. In March 2020, behavioral scientists noted that many citizens did not feel personally threatened by the virus, which they viewed as a barrier to lockdown adherence. Their recommendation was to increase the perceived level of personal threat. The goal was to move the population out of complacency by deliberately inflating the sense of individual danger. This resulted in a campaign of behavioral nudges. This included the use of affect, which portrayed the risk as universally lethal to all demographics, and the manipulation of norms, which framed noncompliance as a moral failing. Digital ecosystems amplified these effects through engagement algorithms. By monitoring user mood and prioritizing high-arousal content like outrage and fear, these systems flooded feeds with information that kept the amygdala in a state of hyper-arousal. When state-sponsored threat inflation is integrated into these algorithmic networks, it creates a closed loop. For the populations involved, the result was a coordinated environment of emotional contagion that bypassed individual deliberation. This strategy eventually collided with a psychological limit. The extended parallel process model shows that fear only motivates constructive action if people feel they have the efficacy to manage the threat. If the threat feels overwhelming and the individual feels helpless, they move into fear control. Instead of dealing with the danger, they focus on suppressing the emotion, leading to denial, avoidance, and paralysis. This context-free bombardment of mortality data had severe consequences. In the UK, moderate to severe psychological distress tripled, and millions developed COVID-19 anxiety syndrome, a state of phobic avoidance that persisted long after the mandates ended. By prioritizing immediate behavioral compliance over psychological stability, these campaigns caused a measurable surge in mental health disorders and fostered a deep-seated cynicism toward civic institutions. To move past this cycle, we have to understand the solution is cognitive. Since manufactured fear relies on an unthinking reflex, the only way to break the conditioning is to intentionally re-engage the rational brain. Ancient Stoic philosophy provides the foundation for this. Their dichotomy of control requires us to distinguish between what is within our power, our thoughts and judgments, and what is not, such as the actions of governments or the tone of the media. The Stoics argued that anxiety does not stem from external events, but from the catastrophic meanings we place upon them. If we can separate the event from our judgment, the fear loses its grip. This is the same principle behind cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT shows that by aggressively challenging irrational thoughts, we can actually dismantle the physiological fear response. By synthesizing these ancient boundaries with modern clinical tools, individuals can develop a cognitive defense that neutralizes external emotional appeals. This process is called cognitive restructuring. It begins by identifying the environmental trigger, like a news report, and isolating the specific catastrophic thought it creates. You apply Socratic questioning and interrogate the evidence. Is this thought based on empirical facts? Has this source been accurate before? Consistently analyzing evidence forces the prefrontal cortex to stay active. This raises your internal alarm threshold, preventing future messaging from triggering a panic. Subjecting these appeals to rigorous logic strips the propagandist of their most potent lever. It returns the power of deliberation to the individual. Don't let your biology be used against you. Take your mind back and build a rational, fearless future.